This is a presentation of Northeast Streaming Sports.
Good morning, everybody. Keith Engel for TGI Sports Talk right here on the Northeast Streaming Sports Network. Welcome everybody in this. It's a bit foggy here in East Greenbush, New York today, but we're going to have another beautiful fall day today. About 70 degrees, nice tiny little breeze. The leaves are turning. It's that time of year. Love the fall. I was just mentioning to our guest today, Steve Zabel, that fall is my favorite time of year. Fall golf and football. What can be wrong with that? Before I get started, I want to thank my guest from last week, Tommy John. We had a great conversation, Tommy and I. Tommy, as you know, is recovering from some side effects he had from his COVID bout back in January. And we still, as we said, wish Tommy well. He's getting better every day and hopes to be on the golf course when he gets to Florida from his stay in Watertown, New York, not far from us here in East Greenbush. Keep in mind, too, Sunday we'll have our live stream of consciousness. Mark Mancini from Mancini Media will be here with me. We'll talk about the baseball playoffs, the Yankees implosion this week, college football, all things sports. And then we've got the college football huddle next week. And my guest next week, I'll be on vacation, but we will have a show that I've got recorded. Next week, we will have Rennie LaRue, the founder and executive director of the New York State Hall of Fame, Baseball Hall of Fame. He's inducted and had some tremendous players, both from the local area here and Yankees and Mets and Giants and Dodgers. And it's a phenomenal undertaking that Rennie's undertaking. And we'll have him on with an interview on Friday, even though I'm away. But you will hear from me while I'm away from time to time. So, with that said, let me say good morning to Dave Guyette, who's always the first one in the room. So welcome, David. And without further ado, my guest is going to be today Steve Zabel, a longtime NFL linebacker, played with the Phillies. He played with my New England Patriots in the early 70s as they grew into a really good team under Chuck Fairbanks, and finished up his career with the Colts, and has done some interesting things in his playing career, including being the founder of something called the Tug, which we'll talk about, which he sells to universities and professional teams as a training tool. So without further ado, let's bring in Mr. Steve Zabel. Good morning, Steve.
Hey, good morning, Keith. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming, and thanks for getting up early out there in Oklahoma. I know that sometimes the hour can be difficult for people, but we appreciate you being up and with us.
I'm normally sleeping at this hour, and I'm sure from looking at me, I should be back in bed, but I'm glad to be here. Here.
Compared to me, you look fine, so I wouldn't worry about that. And you got a few years on me, so you actually look great. So thanks again for being here. And we talked about the weather out there in Oklahoma. You're actually having some moderate temperatures and probably very nice for you out there right now, right?
Yeah, it's right now it's mid 80s, which this time of the year is a pretty good temperature. Oklahoma is a place where if you think you love Oklahoma, come to Oklahoma in August and put up with the heat for a couple of days, and you may never come back.
As you and I talked about last night, though, you had talked about the housing costs being a little bit less expensive than some other areas of the country, but you got to make it up in your electric bill when you're paying for your air conditioning. So I don't know if it's...
Yeah, definitely from May to June and on through September, your air conditioner is running all the time.
Yeah, well, we'll talk more about that as we go forward, because I mean, you grew up in Minnesota, which, gosh, can't be too much different climates than Minnesota and Oklahoma, I'm guessing.
Well, actually, I was born in Minneapolis. I lived in St. Paul and actually went half a year to kindergarten at Como Park Elementary School in St. Paul. And then my mother remarried and we moved to Denver. So I ended up going first grade through high school in Denver.
That's a little bit better climate still than Oklahoma, I think.
Yes, I can't imagine having a better upbringing than I did in Colorado that time frame back in 1954 when my family moved to Denver. There were only 250,000 people in Denver, and the weather was just always fantastic.
250,000. How big is that city now? Gosh, it's got to be
Probably
at least
4 or
four.
5 million.
Yeah.
It's big, big.
Yeah, Colorado's certainly been one of the areas of the country that's really exploded for sure, for a lot of different reasons. Well, growing up and playing high school football and, developing into obviously a very, very good player. Did you play both ways in high school? Did you play tight end and linebacker or other positions then?
Yes, I played both ways in high school, and I also punted, and I also kicked extra points and field goals. And coming out of high school, originally I was the state high school pentathlon champion. I was a track guy, and I had signed a letter of intent with Colorado State University to play football and run track. They had a really good decathlon program at Colorado State, and I signed a letter of intent to go up there, but life has many twists and turns, and like Yogi Berra said, when you get to the fork in the road, take it. And I had a chance to go to Oklahoma via New Mexico military in Roswell. Actually, it happened because the Air Force Academy spotted me in the 12th hour before my freshman year and offered me an opportunity to go to the Air Force Academy, and they sent me to New Mexico military to prep. And my freshman year was kind of like a magical year. We played 10 games, and I think I caught about 60 passes my freshman year. And
That's a lot for that year, for that time of year. Yeah.
Well, we threw the ball back then. We threw the ball 3 plays and scored, or 3 plays and we punted. And either way, I was punting or catching passes. And Oklahoma, I got on their radar, and they recruited me. And actually, Leon Cross, who was a great All-American at OU, was assistant coach at Army, and he was recruiting my roommate Rick Mason to go to Army. And Leon's tour of duty was over in December after my freshman year, and then he got a job at Oklahoma and started recruiting Rick to come to Oklahoma. And when they started looking at films, they went, "Who is that guy? Number 85," and it was me. And Leon started recruiting me to come to Oklahoma, and I said, "No, Leon, I'm going to Air Force Academy." And he said, "Well, we're going to send a private plane to pick you up, and you have a chance to get off campus and get out of the uniform and maybe talk to some girls and no obligation." And I said, "Well, no, I'm not coming." He said, "Are you stupid? I told you it's no obligation." I said, "Well, okay, I'll come up." And I fell in love with the campus and immediately decided to go to OU and went to OU. And my first year, 67, was a magical year for OU.
Yeah. Obviously, it was a great historic program already previously under Bud Wilkinson, winning a bunch of national championships, and you played for Chuck Fairbanks at that time. And you said,
Yes.
as you said, your first year was really, really good season.
Well, Oklahoma was picked to finish 4th in the Big 8 my sophomore year at OU. And just kind of out of nowhere, we ended up winning the Big 8 championship. The only game we lost was to Texas, a dreaded rival, which, by the way, Texas and OU play on Saturday. So
always a big game.
All you Sooner fans, reach out and cheer for the Sooners.
Was it called the Red River Rivalry back then, or is that a newer tagline?
No, it was known as the Red River Rivalry for sure back in the day.
Interesting. So, as your college career progressed, you started out playing exclusively tight end, correct? And
Right.
At what point did they say, Steve, we need you over here on the defensive side of the ball?
Well, actually, my junior year, we started out and we lost the opening game to Notre Dame 45-21. We lost to Colorado 44-27, and we lost to Texas with a minute and a half to go in the game. We were ahead of Texas 20-19, and they drove the length of the field and they beat us. And on Monday after the Texas game, we were 1-3. And Coach Fairbanks called me in his office and he said, Steve, when you go to pro football, you're going to be a tight end or an outside linebacker, and we've proven we can't outscore people, and we want you to play both ways. So I did, and the first game on defense, I got 2 sacks against Kansas State, and then we ended up beating Kansas, which at the time was undefeated, number 2 in the nation. And in the Kansas game, I got about 5 sacks and caught 4 or 5 catches and got National Lineman of the Week for my play, and ended up playing in the Bluebonnet Bowl because we beat Kansas, and actually we were co-champions, but because we had gone to the Orange Bowl the year before, Kansas got to go to the Orange Bowl instead of us, and we went to the Bluebonnet Bowl and ended up, I got hurt in that game right before the half, and we were ahead, and we ended up losing that game. So because I had a knee operation my senior year, they played me at tight end exclusively.
Sounds so. The thing I take away, it sounds weird, but the thing I take away from that whole comment was you're co-champions with Kansas, which sounds so weird to say today in the state of the Kansas program, right? But they were pretty good.
Back when I was at OU, Missouri was really, really good. Colorado was really, really good. Kansas was really, really good. They had Bobby Douglas, who was a great, great quarterback. They had John Riggins and John Zook and Vernon Vanoy. And I mean, Kansas was really, really good back in the day.
Yeah, I'm sure they'd like to revisit some of those times today. OU's continued their tradition pretty much, while Kansas is not remembering not doing the memories of their success tremendously well today.
Well, over the past 40, 50, 60, 70 years, we've had a couple of bad years, but that's been it.
No, it's been you take a look at the state of college football and some of the traditional powers and the way they've struggled. Nebraska, for instance, great traditional rival of Oklahoma. I mean, ever since even a little bit before they left to go to the Big Ten, they haven't even been relevant in the conversation since they left. The Big 12 at that point, but they were part of the Big 8 for the longest time. What are your thoughts on that rivalry going away, kind of?
Yeah, and it was renewed this year, and we got pretty lucky to beat Nebraska. They've fallen on hard times, but they've got a really good team this year, and I'm sure that they're going to end up with a winning record this year. And I hope that Scott doesn't get fired.
Yeah, I think he's onto something there. Not to get off the topic of your stuff, but I think they're starting to find an identity there, and I think they're going to beat Michigan. I actually predicted on my college football huddle to show that they'll beat Michigan this weekend.
I think you're right. I think you're right.
It'll be very interesting. On that topic of the college landscape, Steve, what are your thoughts? I mean, you go back to your day, and you had great regional rivalries. And college football is really a regional sport with a national interest because of the national championship and all of that. But some of that regionalness has been taken away because of the realignment of conferences and whatnot. And I hate it myself. What are your thoughts growing up and playing in that time? What are your thoughts about what we're looking at today? And OU, for instance, moving to the SEC?
Well, I think you better be careful what you ask for because you might get it. And I'm afraid that going into the SEC, OU might have a more difficult time than they've had in the past. When you look at Alabama and Georgia, I can't imagine any teams beating those two teams this year, so it'll be tough. But I love the Big Eight, the rivalries we had. I know back in the day, in the early 70s, OU finished first and Nebraska second, and Colorado third in the national polls one year, or Nebraska was first and Oklahoma was second, and Colorado was third, and Oklahoma State back in the day had some pretty good teams, and Missouri was always a hard game. And I hate the fact that college football has come down to money. It's all about money.
It is. I agree. I mean, very rich history there in the Big Eight too. Some tremendous coaches come out of there. You know, at your alma mater, you got Wilkinson, and you've got Fairbanks for a shorter period of time, and Barry Switzer, and in Nebraska you got Devaney and Osborne, and then things kind of trickle off. But just some tremendous coaches.
Right after Osborne, they had Frank Solich.
Yeah.
And they really screwed up getting rid of Solich, and then they finally get a coach, and they really do good. The guy that's at Youngstown State now, that they ended up firing after he went 8-4, 8-4, 8-4, 8-4, 9-2, 9-2. Can't recall his name. He was the defensive coordinator at.
Not Blake, was it?
No, he was a defensive coordinator at Alabama last year. It didn't work out for him.
Oh, I can't think of his name now. That's interesting. Yeah, they kind of had a run where they went through some interesting, like Howard Schnellenberger was an interesting hire, right? That didn't work out for a year, and they chased. They got a good one.
We had John Blake, who was a former player who had a 4-year run that wasn't any good. Same way after Bud Wilkinson, they had a run with Gomer Jones, Bud's top assistant. He had a couple losing seasons, and they brought in a guy named Jim McKenzie from Arkansas.
Wow.
And McKenzie got things turned around. He brought in Barry Switzer and Chuck Fairbanks and Pat James and Buck Nystrom, and we had a coaching staff
it's a great staff.
Best staff ever as far as I'm concerned. But McKenzie died of a heart attack, and they gave the job to Fairbanks right when I signed. 2 or 3 days before I signed with OU, Fairbanks took over. I was his first college signee.
Oh, that's an interesting fact. You know, the guy I left out of that list was Bob Stoops. I don't know how I missed him. He was obviously a great coach at Oklahoma, too.
Stoops was fantastic. And when you take Stoops and Switzer and Wilkinson, that's three pretty darn good coaches.
That's for sure. There's not a lot of schools that can pile them up like that, I can tell you right now.
No, sir.
So let's move on. I mean, when your career ends at Oklahoma, you get drafted into the NFL by the Eagles as a tight end, I believe, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So you go there, and the team's not terribly good in Philadelphia, and which had to be an interesting transition for you, not winning on a consistent basis. What was it like, your transition? How different was the pro game then compared to college, and what was it like transitioning for you?
Well, I actually was the sixth player taken in the 1970 draft. And when you get picked number 6, it normally means you're playing on a less than great team.
Yeah.
And my first year at Philly, we went 3-10-1. And at the end, or after 3 games, my second year, Jerry Williams, who was the head coach my rookie year, got fired. And Eddie Kayat, a defensive line coach we had, took over, and we turned the program around and ended up going 6-7-1, and we had a lot of momentum going, and we're really rolling. And Eddie got rid of all the other coaches and brought in his buddies, and we, believe it or not, we went 9 weeks of 2-a-days that year, and we went Oklahoma drill, they call Nutcracker drill affectionately, but it was nothing more every day in the mornings of trying to prove that you were tough, and we ended up going 2-12. My only saving grace was I got hurt and had my elbow and my knee operated on the same time, so I could kind of disassociate myself from the team, and came back that next year, and we had a lot better year.
What you were drafted as a tight end. What prompted your again this? What was prompted to move to defense there? Was it kind of the same kind of scenario?
Well, actually, when I was drafted by the Eagles, they told me they wanted me to get as big as I could get because they wanted me to be a bigger blocking tight end. I had blocked exclusively for Steve Owens. He averaged about 50 carries a game.
Great player.
Won the Heisman Trophy, and so they knew I could block, and I got bigger and 30 pounds over what I had played in college. And unfortunately, when you get behind 21-0 in the first quarter, you don't run the ball like you plan. And it was really frustrating. My rookie year, I got kicked out of 3 games for fighting. And at the end of the year, they said, we don't think you have the proper temperament to be successful on offense. We want to move you to defense. And I lost 40 pounds and came back the next year at 230. And the rest was history. I love playing outside linebacker.
Can I assume you won those 3 fights, Jim?
No.
Or no. Steve? Where'd I get Jim from? Sorry, Steve.
That's all right. No. Matter of fact, the last game of the year, we were playing the Pittsburgh Steelers, and the year was so frustrating that my wife and I had already moved out of our apartment. She was sitting in the parking lot in the car with my new baby girl, Jessica, listening to the radio of the game. And with about 3 minutes to go, they go, and there's a fight breaking out, and there's an Eagle that's just getting pummeled by the Steelers, and it's number 89, Steve Zabel. And they kicked me out of the game, and I went in the locker room, took a shower, and I left before our team even got in the locker room. Needless to say, it was a real frustrating year for me.
Yeah.
And they told me to move to linebacker. I jumped on the opportunity.
I mean, the team was pretty bad. I mean, you had some guys that became really good players. Harold Carmichael was on that team. Are there other guys that stand out that it's unfortunate they were stuck in that situation and in such a bad situation?
Yeah, we had our safety, Bill Bradley, was all-pro safety and could have played for anybody. And we had a quarterback by the name of Roman Gabriel that came to us from the Los Angeles Rams, and Harold Jackson and Bill Berge and John Bunting. And, the problem was that Leonard Tost was a real impetuous owner. And if you didn't turn things around in 2 years, you were gone. So consequently, in my first 4 years at Philly, I had 3 different head coaches. And finally, Mike McCormick took over going into my 4th year. And Mike and I didn't get along that well. And to make a long story short, after my 5th year, my contract was up. My second contract was up. And I tried to renegotiate a new contract for 6 months. And finally I said, well, let me talk with the head coach and the general manager, Jimmy Murray. And during that meeting, every game that I thought I played good in, they said I played bad. And every game I thought I played bad in, they said I played good. And then he said, McCormick said, and do you know you busted cover 252 times this year? And I said, what are you kidding me? It seems to me that the coach should have told me I was busting the coverage. And he said, well, Coach Michaels said he told you. And I said, you know what? I wouldn't play for you some bitches for $100,000. And I walked out the door. And then I stuck my head back in and I said, maybe for 100 I would. And they traded me 2 hours later to New England, where Chuck Fairbanks, my college coach, was the general manager and head coach. And my life changed drastically with that one trade.
Yeah, I imagine you were happy about that. I mean, I assumed your relationship was good with Coach Fairbanks, and you were happy to get away from Philadelphia and back in that atmosphere.
Yeah, my relationship with Coach Fairbanks was awesome. The only thing I made a mistake in, I should have told him I was asking for 200 grand rather than 100.
You think he'd have given it to you?
I think he would have.
Great coach. I mean, he did a tremendous job in New England, being a younger man at that point, but being a fan of watching that team. It was bad when I was younger, really bad. You're talking about the Eagles. The Patriots were just as bad. Yes. But he turned that situation around fairly quickly.
Yes.
What was he like? Was he a different coach in the NFL than he was in college, or was it the same kind of approach?
No, he was a matured coach when he got into pro football. When we were at Oklahoma University, all the players were scared to death of Chuck. He ran the program with an iron hand, and if you got out of line, he would make you pay for it. There were many times that I got singled out as a troublemaker, and he had to run and run and run and run and run. But by the time I got up to New England, Chuck knew that I could play, and he brought me in. And we had my first year up there, we went 3-11.
Yeah,
so not very good. But that same team the next year went 11-3, and we beat Oakland, the eventual Super Bowl champion, 48-20 or 12, up in New England, and we ended up playing them in the playoffs out in Alameda, California, and when we stepped on the field, the grass was 8 inches tall, and the field was muddy as all get out.
Because you guys ran the ball like crazy that year, right?
Yeah. We were the number one rushing team, and up until just recently, we had the record for 40 years, but Al Davis took care of us, and Chuck Fairbanks should have said, we won't play on the field. It's unfair, because with no time on the clock, Kenny Stabler bootlegged the ball in for a touchdown, and they went on to beat Minnesota, which we had beat Minnesota and Pittsburgh that year.
I mean, I remember that very vividly. In my mind, you guys got totally screwed in that game. A couple different types of plays. I remember at the end, near the end of the game, Russ Francis getting mugged.
Actually, the first play of the game, George Atkinson hit Russ Francis in the nose with an elbow, broke his nose, and Russ, tough as he was, went back in and played. But we got cheated. The head official called a penalty, a roughing the passer penalty on Raymond Hamilton. It was 4th down and 21, incomplete pass, and the official called roughing the passer penalty. And years later, I was watching a Monday Night Football game, and Madden was on there, and he saw that official, and he goes, "There's my old pal."
I'll bet.
Who made the call. Yeah, we got cheated for sure. And so we were in the playoffs 2 of the 4 years while I was up with the Patriots, and 3 of the 4 years we were really good. And then Fairbanks started having some problems with his daughter in New England, and ended up wanting to go back to coach college ball, and took a job with Colorado, and the Patriots went off the map again for a long time.
They did. I mean, would you say in your years in pro football, was that 1976 Patriot team the best team you played on?
Oh, no question. No question. I'm not so sure that Patriot team in '76 wasn't better than the Super Bowl teams.
All of them?
Maybe.
Really? It was a very good team. That's quite a statement. It's hard to compare the eras, obviously, but you're probably right with the running game that you guys had. And Grogan, he was a tough guy at quarterback, and having replaced Plunkett, whose career was kind of nadering by the time you got there. What was that like when you got there? I mean, Jim Plunkett was a first-round draft pick and a Heisman Trophy winner, and just got the bejesus beat out of him in New England, and things didn't work out well. How did you see that as it was ending for him in New England?
Well, he had hurt knees, and he was at that point in his career pretty timid. And if you got a rush around him, he would just go down in pain. And I thought when he got traded that his career was over. But somehow you get resurrected, and after getting traded, his trade was the backbone of our success. Fairbanks got 3 or 4 first-round draft choices and was able to draft Russ Francis and Mike Haynes and Timmy Fox, and
That's a
we
pretty
had
good
Steve
turn for.
Nelson as a great linebacker, and John Hanna and Russ Francis and Sam Bam Cunningham and Grogan. We were a damn good team.
Tremendous drafting by I believe all of that was done by Chuck Fairbanks. Nothing before him.
Fairbanks had a tremendous eye for talent. That was always his strength. Matter of fact, when Fairbanks left Oklahoma, Barry Switzer didn't lose a game for 3 years, and Fairbanks left the defensive line with the Selman brothers, Dewey, Leroy, and Lucius Selman, and Joe Washington and Greg Pruitt, and my gosh, the wealth just continued under Switzer.
Yeah. Tell me about another guy I want to ask you about is the quarterback in Steve Grogan. Steve Grogan played quarterback almost like a like a linebacker in a lot of ways in my mind, the way his mentality for the game was. What was he like as a teammate?
Grogan was a tough SOB, and he was a great team player, and he would play if he had a cast on his leg, he'd cut it off before the game and play. He just was a complete team player, and he would have fit in very well with Steve King and Steve Grogan and Steve Zabel and George Webster and Rod Schote and the different linebackers we had for sure.
Got some great ones too. That defense was really good. We talked about the rushing game, we talked about the quarterback, but that defense was really, really good.
We used to maul teams. We used to love to play ball together, and I remember one time we beat the Baltimore Colts in New England, and they had 28 yards total offense.
Well, since we're talking about this, I'll switch gears. Dave Gat's got a question. He wants to know who was the best player you feel you played with during your career?
Well, hands down, John Hanna.
Oh my gosh. Obviously.
John Hanna was 6'4", about 310, and he could run a 4.6 40, and you'd watch him during the game. It didn't matter who he was playing against; he would just maul him. He just was arguably the best offensive lineman that ever played.
I would I might be a little biased myself, but I would back that argument because I've never seen one as good. That's for sure.
Well, you'd be hard pressed to lose that bet by calling him the best, for sure.
Yeah. What about the and let me transition a little bit, because I know the fans in Philadelphia have a reputation for being pretty rough on the teams and other fans and pretty much everybody, including Santa Claus. What about the fans in New England? And they're great fans, because I've been one of them, and I had season tickets there past your time in the 80s. But I know from my time sitting in those stands, it always felt like whoever the quarterback was, and now this is just one instance. I want to know about the fans overall in your mind, but one instance that always struck me, whoever the quarterback was, they wanted the guy that was the backup all the time.
Yeah.
But what was your overall view of the fans in Philadelphia compared to New England?
Well, Philly fans were really rougher on the players than the New England fans. And, my experience as a player with New England was 3 of the 4 years I was there. We were really good and had a winning record and a winning team. So I didn't get the wrath of the people like I might have in Philly. But I tell you, the fans in Philadelphia knew if you had a big heart, and they knew if you were a competitor, and they knew if you played hard, and they would cut you slack if you were one in that category. So I always felt like they treated me really well in Philly, and they were tough on the officials, and they're tough on the head coaches if we weren't winning, which we weren't at the time.
Yeah, which is, it's fair to boo. It's, some of the fans today, the way things get out of control with, throwing food at people and anti-Semitic remarks and, racist remarks in general. It's crazy because you can go boo your team, but just because you paid a bunch of money for a ticket doesn't give you the right to just totally abuse people either,
Right.
Uh, Again, in New England, I mean, did you get any sense of that, by the way, the quarterback thing? And maybe Grogan, was the time you were there, Grogan was a little more entrenched than he was later in his career. Did you get any sense of that, that fan want for the guy who wasn't playing all the time?
No, not at all. Not at all.
I think that might have been something that kind of took place a little bit later in his career when he had, Matt Cavanaugh was there backing him up, and then Tony Eason came in, and whoever was playing, they wanted the other guy, it seemed, all the time. But
well, it's funny that you should say that, because right now the University of Oklahoma has a quarterback by the name of Spencer Rattler, who at the first of the year was picked to win the Heisman Trophy, and Oklahoma is 5-0, and the fans in Oklahoma are booing him and calling for the backup, who's a freshman, to play, just because OU's not killing people. They're winning the games and they are 5-0, but fans are fickle. Yeah,
they sure. He was a preseason first pick for the Heisman, I think, and a lot of the people.
Sure was.
It's a tide can turn so fast in college and the NFL, as you mentioned. Listen. Who else? I mean, who are your big influences? Whether it was as you came of age as a great player, Steve. Who were the biggest influences on you becoming the player you eventually became? The one I watched, at least in New England, who I thought was a great player, tough guy. Who influenced you the most?
Quite honestly, before I came to New England, I never had a position coach, an outside linebacker coach. And when I came to New England, Chuck Fairbanks had an inside linebacker coach, and he had an outside linebacker coach. And my coach back when I was with New England was Raleigh Dotch, who's since gone to glory. But Raleigh worked with me and gave me some suggestions that I adapted to my play that helped me tremendously. Something as simple as, Steve, you're playing too high, you're standing up when you're playing, and you need to lower your elevation on the field. It will help you. And I went from being a pretty good player to being, in my opinion, a great outside linebacker.
I would agree with that, by the way. You had mentioned, I might remember when we first chatted, you might remember my time in New England. And I said, absolutely, I do. That's why I've been chasing you around trying to get you on the show.
Well, thanks.
You had a tremendous career, as I saw. You mentioned the position coaches because, I mean, was Chuck very obvious today? We got a position coach for pretty much everything, left tackle, right tackle. There's a coach for everything. Was Coach Fairbanks on kind of the cutting edge there, or was that already kind of moving in that direction in the NFL?
No, it was not moving. Basically all the teams had a linebacker coach, and they had a secondary coach, and they had a line coach, and they had a defensive coordinator, and that was it. And nowadays they've got the left tackles coach and the right tackles coach and inside backer, and I applaud Fairbanks for him having the foresight to realize that it was important to, I played, when I was with Philadelphia, I played outside linebacker my second year in the league. Going into my third year in the league, they traded Tim Rosevich, who was our middle linebacker, and said to me, Zabel, you're moving into the middle. And I went, okay, here I go. And I can tell you that the NFL is not the place to learn to play middle linebacker. There are two different positions, to say the least. And to make a long story short, I ended up tearing up my right knee in training camp, and I missed 8 weeks of the regular season. And I came back for about 4 games, and I ended up tearing up my left knee and my left elbow, and our team went 2-12 that year, and it was just a miserable year. I wish I could have gone back and said, no, I'm playing outside linebacker, find somebody else. But, I think we were raised differently. We were raised to respect our mom and dad and to respect our coaches. And if they ask you to run through a brick wall, that's what you tried to do.
Yeah, it's a little different today, unfortunately, in most cases. That's sad, too. You mentioned earlier Chuck Fairbanks' tenure coming to an end and him taking the head coaching job at Colorado. That was kind of you were still there. That was kind of a messy situation, as I remember it. He resigned. They suspended him, and I think Ron Earhart might have coached the game. Then he came back and coached in the playoffs. And was the turmoil palpable in the clubhouse at that time, or just from the outside that it seemed
no, it was palpable in the clubhouse. Matter of fact, we were down in Miami playing Monday Night Football against the Dolphins.
Yeah.
As the last game of the year, we had already won the AFC East, and we were headed to the playoffs. And the thing that was frustrating was before the game, the Fairbanks' pregame speech to the team was, guys, I hate to tell you this, but I've been relieved of my duties by Sullivan, and I wish you the best. I'm going to the University of Colorado. And when we heard that, it was just like, are you kidding me? Because in '76, we got cheated out of the playoffs by the Oakland Raiders. In '77, because of the way the end of the year came down, even though we had as good a record as the Baltimore Colts, we ended up not making the playoffs because of our record inside of the division or whatever. So that's year number 2 that we got screwed out of the Super Bowl. And then year number 3 was Fairbanks getting fired by Sullivan, and myself and Russ Francis and Steve Nelson, we begged Mr. Sullivan to let Fairbanks coach, and how unfair it was to the team, to the players, by him firing Fairbanks and not letting him finish out the career. And once Fairbanks gave us that speech, we were doomed. And sure enough, the Houston Oilers came up and they beat us like dogs.
At home, right?
Yeah, at home. It was a bad deal.
It's unfortunate because that was another great team, as you said, with great potential to get all the way, and it's such a shame. It always seemed like something crazy would happen.
Well, that's what I was saying. 3 years in a row at the end of the year, it just turned, the whole team went to hell.
Before we move on from your Patriot career, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about this. We talked about the Raiders, and I guess there was a bit of a rivalry there because of the playoff game, and obviously the Darryl Stingley situation that happened with Jack Tatum. I know you were on that team. What are your thoughts on that and Jack Tatum and the way the whole thing was handled by Tatum later on? I mean, was it a dirty play? Was it just the dangers that come with a dangerous sport, especially at that time? What are your thoughts on this whole situation, Steve?
Well, I was on the sideline watching the whole play happen, and Darryl ran a slant pattern, and Grogan threw the ball a little high, and Tatum got a beat on him and took Darryl out. And, back when we were playing, and still today, the game of football is a game of intimidation and big hits and competitiveness. And Tatum, though, crossed over the line when he did what he did to Darryl. And when I saw Darryl get hit, I just thought, oh, Lord, please, not his neck, not his neck.
Yeah.
And sure enough, it was his neck, and he was paralyzed forever and lost his life several years ago and died way too young, and it was awful. And Tatum was a real dickhead by not offering his apologies and trying to reach out to Darryl, and just it was bad deal. And someday Tatum will pay for it.
Yeah, a great call there. I mean, at that time, did any of the Raiders visit Darryl, or what was it like with the rest of the Raider team outside of Tatum?
I am not sure at all about that. I think maybe Madden came and visited Darryl in the hospital while he was still in California, but I know that Tatum never said sorry, never reached out to Darryl, never tried to mend the fences for what he had done at all.
Never in his life, right? I mean,
Never.
I know.
Never.
And this was an exhibition game. Besides, that's one of the even makes it worse in a way. I mean, not that it could be worse, but I mean, it wasn't even a game that meant anything.
No, you're correct. Matter of fact, we played 6 meaningless games every year before the regular season. They changed it finally in '78 or so that it went from 6 to 4 games, and we went regular season from 12 to 14 games.
Yeah.
Or 14 to 16. Yeah.
I will tell you, Darryl Stingley became a bit of an inspiration, though, too, because even with this tragedy that happened, I mean, he was part of the Patriots organization, I believe, up until he passed away, right?
Yes, the Sullivans really took Darryl under their wing and went above and beyond the call of duty for Darryl. And
yeah,
one of the reasons I love the Sullivans.
His son actually played up here in Albany for the Albany Firebirds in the Arena Football League years ago, which was a great defensive back there. They won a championship actually when he was there, and gosh, I want to say 98, 99, something like that. And now his son, obviously.
Was that Patrick's son?
That was Darryl Stingley's son.
Oh, yeah, Darryl Stingley's son, yes.
Yeah, Darryl Jr. Now, his son is a great player at LSU.
Yes. Matter of fact, talking about Darryl's son, my son, Matt, played in the Junior College World Series Baseball Championship in Steamboat Springs, or, in Glenwood Springs. Anyway, in the Junior College World Series, they played in. He had actually gone to junior college. I think it was Triton Junior College in Chicago and played baseball. Quite a deal.
Well, yeah, it is. I mean, Darryl's legacy kind of lives on through his family, which is kind of cool in a way, I think. Well,
for sure.
So. In fact, there was a story on ESPN Game Day a few weeks back about his grandson, so the one that's playing at LSU. When he graduated high school, his father had been holding on to his father, Darryl's, game jersey from the Patriots and gave it to him either on senior night for football or his graduation. It was just a tremendous story, and nobody even knew he had this jersey, and it was really kind of a cool moment to watch. So, a good man, and his legacy lives on, so we're happy about that.
For sure. On a lighter note, before we move off of the Patriots, in '76, when we cinched a playoff spot with one game to go, and Chuck Fairbanks took us down to Tampa. We played Tampa the last game in '76, and Tampa had not won a game all year, and so we went down for 3 or 4 days of rest and relaxation to try to get well for the playoffs. And we played the game, and Grogan scored a touchdown with no time left on the clock. And I had always been the backup kicker, not only at Philadelphia, but also at New England. And I took it upon myself to run out on the field and tell John Smith to get the hell off the field. And Dick Kahn told Mike Patrick, the punter, who was our holder, to get off the field. And Pete Brock snapped the ball, and Kahn put it down, and I knocked it right through.
Oh, that's awesome. I didn't know that. I did not know that story.
Yeah, 1 for 1 in my career as a kicker. And, my relationship with Fairbanks was so good that he never said a word about it. The play was meaningless, but for a trivia buff, who scored the last point of the '76 season for the Patriots?
I'm going to remember that now. Steve Zabel. That's awesome. You and Doug Flutie have this kind of unique honor. He had a drop kick extra point, if you remember.
Yeah, I'd say he was a way better player than I was.
Well, he played a different position. I don't think we can really compare. And I was never a Flutie fan, so I'm going to pick Steve Zabel. Sorry. Not just because you're here either. If Doug was with us, I would tell him the same thing.
Thank you.
So you move on for the Patriots. You had a little bit of a stopover with Indianapolis, but I want to get to your post career a little bit. So you did some good things working with the homeless. You moved back to Oklahoma when you retired, and you did some good things with the homeless. And I certainly want to get to your endeavor today. So give us a little idea of some of the things you've done since you retired.
Well, when I first came back to Oklahoma, and I moved back in '78. Matter of fact, I was making more money in the off season in the oil business than I was making playing pro football at that point in my career.
Yeah.
And so Chuck Fairbanks told me, when you get done with pro football, make sure that you talk to Walter Duncan, a businessman in Oklahoma, before you set out on your business career. And when I talked to Walter, he said, Steve, if I were you, I'd get into oil and gas or real estate. And I got into both of them. In 1984, the oil business crashed. The oil prices went to $7 a barrel. And my wife and I lost everything, and I had to start over. So I got into telecommunications and made my way back into the financial realm. And in 1993, myself and another teammate named Larry Bross from OU started a nonprofit called City Care. We started feeding homeless in downtown Oklahoma City. And on January 1st, 1993, I served 36 dozen eggs to the homeless in Oklahoma, and just went on from there to be the chairman of the board and the director of development over 25 years. And now the City Care is a program that they don't feed the homeless anymore, but they built a program that over the years has hundreds of homeless housing opportunities. They've got a transitional housing development called the Pershing Center, which houses up to 60 clients. And we've got a inner city tutor mentor program called the Whiz Kids,
Yeah.
which is a one-on-one tutoring program that we tutor 800 to 1,000 kids every year. And we've been doing it for close to 30 years now. And I retired 7 years ago from that opportunity.
Oh, great stuff that you did for the community. Great job. It's inspirational in its own way, your story, being a professional football star, retiring and making boatload of money and losing it all and starting all over. I mean, and you kept moving forward. And that's impressive and a great story itself.
Yeah, but the great thing about football and team sports in general, they teach you to endure. And the only way the game is over is if you quit. And we're taught not to quit. As a matter of fact, when I was at Oklahoma University, every day we had players leaving. Every day, players leaving. The coaches made it so difficult. And their attitude was, if they're going to quit, let's make them quit right now before they get to the games. Matter of fact, my senior year, there were only 7 kids left in our junior class, which started out with about 70 players.
Wow.
So it was instilled in you that you don't quit. You don't quit. You just keep on going.
A great point of how sports is so important in the fabric of teaching young people lessons in life, not just about winning, right? But how to lose and pick yourself back up. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Before we run out of time here, I'd be remiss if we didn't get in and talk about your endeavor today that I mentioned at the top of the show called The Tug. And I've got a couple of shots I'll let play here while you tell us about The Tug and the inspiration behind this.
Well, in the year 2001, I had always wanted to coach football. And Steve Nelson, the great New England Patriot linebacker, was the head coach at Curry College, a Division III school in Milton. And Steve said, "You want to coach? Come on up here and you can help me." And so I went up there during the season, and I'd go up to New England in August, and I'd come back to Oklahoma in November. But while we were there, a young coach went to a pre-Curry camp, and a coach told me, if you really want to have some fun with your players, get some old tires and have them do a tug of war and just watch and see. And so Nelly let me get 6 old tires, and we had the offense versus the defense. And when we blew the whistle, it was amazing. 1 or 2 of the battles were over immediately, and then another two a little longer, and invariably with 6 guys going at a time or 12 guys going at a time, there was always one or two contests that went longer and longer and longer. And when I saw that, I thought back to my college days. We did a drill at Oklahoma called stick wrestling, where they took a broom handle and cut it off 24 inches, and they gave it to two players, and one guy would grab it and the other guy would grab it, and on the whistle, the first guy to get it away from the guy won.
Yeah.
And every day it turned out somebody break a nose or get a tooth knocked out. And I'll never forget thinking, what in the world are they trying to prove? But when I saw this tug of war contest, I thought they were trying to see if we would compete. And I liked the tires because nobody got hurt. And then I started thinking about it, and they didn't get hurt because there was separation. They couldn't hit each other like they did with the stick. And then I talked to a defensive coordinator at Harvard, and I asked him about the tire tug of war, and he said, "Oh, we did it all the time." I said, "What do you mean you did it all the time?" He said, "Well, we did it all the time until we got a tractor tire because we wanted more weight. And one day a kid let it go, and it hit another kid in the femur, and it broke his leg, and that was
Sounds dangerous.
so I
Yeah.
knew that the activity of tug of war was something valid, and I knew that more weight was valid, and I knew safety was the most important point. So over the next couple of years, I came up with the idea of developing an apparatus that would change weight by adding water. And this tug is actually able to hold 15 gallons of water if it's full, which takes the weight of the tug from 15 pounds empty to 125, 30 pounds full of water. And I've started selling it in 2006 and been selling them ever since. College, universities, high schools,
Yeah.
not only football, but soccer and basketball and wrestling, and any teams that are looking to add competitiveness to the program buy the tugs.
Well, you got a lot of big clients here as I look at the website, and all these Division I FBS schools, including your alma mater in Texas and Michigan, and NFL teams like the Titans, and I know I saw somebody else. As you mentioned, college basketball programs. Guys, check out the tug if you're an athletic director or I guess there's even other organizations that could probably make use of this if they're into physical fitness and training methods. Take a look at this at thetug.net.
Yes.
And there's some great information there about it. So I think it's you did mention one thing wrong with your business model, though. You made it indestructible, so you can never sell anybody that you already sold, right?
Yeah, I fooled around with the durability of the tug, and you make it stronger by adding more of the chemicals that go into it, or you make it lighter by taking them out. And there's 15 pounds of material called ethyl vinyl acetate, EVA, and I started making them with lesser of that, and I started getting calls from people saying, "Oh, my tug leaks," and I just started thinking, I don't want that to happen. So I went back to the original specs.
Yeah.
They'll find some of those tugs in the dump someday, and they'll go, "What in the world is that?"
Well, in a world where everything is made to break in 3 years, as I told you last night, phones, cars, furniture, you're making something that's going to last forever. So your legacy will last with it. So wonderful job there. Steve, thanks so much for coming on today. I loved reminiscing with you about your college days and your time with the Patriots. So I love so much then and now. And I appreciate your time this morning. It's been a great hour.
Is the time up already?
It is. We flew by it over an hour now, almost. So.
Well, the only thing I wish would be different is that I get paid $1,000 an hour.
Oh, didn't I tell you you were getting? Did I tell you you were getting paid? Maybe I'll send you a mug.
That'd be great.
It's worth
Listen,
$1,000.
I wish you the best of luck. I've enjoyed it, and Go Pats.
Oh, Pats, let's get them. We got to get back. Well, we'll get back on the winning track this week against the Texans, or then I'm really going to be mad if we don't.
I think the Patriots are really doing great. Belichick's got a great team this year, and I think before the end of the year, the people are going to have to deal with the Patriots.
Exactly what I said. I said there'd be some learning curve and some speed bumps early in the year, but by the end of the year, they'll be fighting for a wild card, and nobody will want to play them in the playoffs.
Amen.
Okay, Steve, thanks so much for your time today. You have a great day.
See you later. Bye.
Bye-bye. Guys, a great Steve Zabel. In my mind, one of the toughest and best linebackers I watched play in my lifetime watching football. And I enjoyed talking with him. Get out there, look at the tug. If you're an athletic director or coaching in any sport, looking to improve your players' training capabilities, take a look at the tug.net. Steve, thank you so much for coming on. Guys, I'll be on vacation, as I said, next week. I will be on Sunday Morning Live. I'll be on Wednesday Night Live, but next week will be recorded. So if you're making comments, I'm not going to be able to address them. So enjoy your weekend. We'll see you Sunday on the Sunday Stream of Consciousness show. Keith Engel for TGI Sports Talk on the Northeast Streaming Sports Network. Thank you to Steve Zabel. Have a great weekend.